Hi, I'm here today with Nikki Bell, and I want to get this right. She's the CEO of Living in Freedom Together.
That's right.
And one of our new co-hosts, Suzanne Morelli-Lieber. And
Thank you.
Former CEO of the Marlboro Chamber and longtime friend, and has hosted her own show over the years in Marlboro. So I'm welcoming you to the team here, the crew here too.
I'm excited to join you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming. Yours is such an inspiring story from what I've read about you and followed you a bit. So I was really anxious to have you on and talk about what you're doing now. To put that in perspective, can you talk just a little bit about what your history is?
Sure. So I am a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation. So I was exploited as a teenager and spent most of my adult life in the commercial sex industry. And so after exiting 5 years ago, I started Living in Freedom Together. We call it LIFT. To help support other survivors that were still in the life and that are looking to exit and need those support services.
Okay, and what are you doing now? Because you're doing all sorts of things, wonderful things.
Sure. So LIFT, we started 5 years ago, and it essentially started as a support group. You know, when I exited, there was not really much. There really wasn't any specific support for survivors of prostitution and trafficking. And so it was something that, you know, I'm also a person in long-term recovery, which for me means I haven't used drugs or alcohol in over 5 years. And so I was always told to focus on the addiction component, you know, I needed to recover from my addiction. But in order to do that, I needed to look at the underlying issues and the traumas I had experienced, which was the reason that I was using drugs to begin with. And so there's a lot of support for people in recovery, from recovery centers and programs and, you know, different pathways to recovery. But for specifically support around exiting prostitution and how that impacts people's lives, you know, there wasn't anything. And so I founded LIFT in 2014. We became a nonprofit in 2016, and we have a variety of different programs, from a drop-in center where women that are actively involved in prostitution, with the majority with an active substance use disorder as well, can come in, get first and foremost support and safety from other survivors that have exited. Clothing, cosmetics, hygiene products, Narcan, harm reduction tools. And we also are a funded program in the Women's Correctional Facility, so we do educational groups on what prostitution and trafficking is in Hampden County House of Correction. We also do community-based support groups. We just started a diversion program with the Worcester District Attorney's Office. And we are, on October 1st, we are opening Jana's Place, which is the first recovery home specific for survivors exiting prostitution with co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders.
Can you share with us how you got out? Or how,
Sure.
You know, is that something you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. So one of the I think, biggest impacts that prostitution and trafficking leaves on people is that you've been reduced to a commodity and are turned into a product essentially. And so I felt like my entire life, it was I was looked at like I had dollar signs on my forehead, and all that I had to offer this world was my body, right? And so for me, it was having the support of other women that had themselves experienced it, and looking at me like I had value in this world apart from my body, and had something to bring to this world, and you know, and had something to offer essentially. And also it was there was a lot of work going on in the city of Worcester at the time I had exited to address the issues of commercial sexual exploitation. And so I had been invited to these tables. It was called the Worcester Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation. And sitting around the room with all of these community providers and leaders in our community, looking to end, this
Yeah.
this practice for gender-based violence, and looking to me like I had something to offer the conversation. So for me, it was like being empowered to get involved in a solution. I think
Super.
was such an important component for me exiting.
How many women can you house in the new house?
So it's 15 beds. So year one, it will be 15 single adult women. Year two, there will be a couple of beds for women with babies as well.
Okay.
Because the reality is this is a generational problem. So what we see is the majority of the women that we're working with are individuals that have aged out of our foster care system. And so what's happening is then they're having children and they're being put back right back into that same system that these women have aged out of. And so the cycle kind of repeats itself. And so we're looking to, address both of those things so that we can, break this vicious cycle that makes people vulnerable to being recruited and exploited in the commercial sex trade.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you and other women recruited? And I'd love to know the moment you decided, I've had enough. What prompted that?
So, I think people can be recruited anywhere. I think we have this idea of trafficking that it's this creepy guy in a van that throws these girls in the back and ties them to it's the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, girl chained to the radiator and sold overseas, and trafficking can happen. Yes, it can happen in that through abduction, but that's less than 5% of the cases that are U.S. based, right? So typically you're recruited by somebody somebody that pretends to be a boyfriend, or it's not this stranger that's again, throwing you in the back of the van.
Sure.
That's not how it happens. Typically, someone will invest a lot of time and energy into helping you to believe that they care about you. They'll figure out what is missing in your life in that moment, whether that be a father figure, whether that be stability at home, whether that be a place to stay. So what traffickers are extremely inept at spotting vulnerability and then preying upon that vulnerability. So typically people are recruited or boyfriended, they call it. And I'm speaking specifically to sex trafficking because our work is to end prostitution, and sex trafficking is a component of that. And so, typically somebody pretends to be their boyfriend, and then will earn this vulnerable person's trust. And we're looking at people that have people in prostitution and that have been exploited or trafficked, typically, don't have great family supports, are involved in the Department of Children and Families, are homeless, have different vulnerabilities that they can exploit, from substance use disorder to mental illness to homelessness to, there's a range of things that people exploit. And so kind of stepping in and being that. So I was recruited by somebody I knew. It was somebody that worked I got my first job at a restaurant at 16 years old, and it was a woman that worked their son. And he, again, did the whole boyfriending process with me and pretended he was somebody that cared about me and earned my trust, right? And at that time in my life, there was a lot going on. My mother was really ill. My father, and my mother and father had divorced, and I was just kind of spiraling with mental illness and starting to get involved with drugs and alcohol. So there was a lot going on in my life at that time, and he was able to kind of prey upon all of those things.
And that moment when you decided that I'd had enough of this.
So it's actually funny because it's not really funny, but for me it was, I had been arrested so many times while I was involved in prostitution. And so it was over and over and over again, this just cycle of being arrested, going to jail, being released to the same street corner that I had been arrested on. And for me, that moment was kind of sitting in the back of this van and all of the girls were hysterical that we were going to jail, and for me, it had become just so normalized that it was like,
okay.
it's just, this is, and so once I had gotten there, I was like, what is the matter with me that this is okay? I was actually like, no, you get a hot meal when we get there. That was so it was like, wow, there was a time in my life where I had hopes and dreams and things that I wanted to do. And now it's just this is it. And, I had become so institutionalized. And for me, it was kind of just this moment of clarity of what am I doing?
So I asked that because that's where you're trying to find young women, for the most part, at that point or close to that point where they're wondering the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
So I guess everybody's different, right? So sometimes people will want to exit after a significant assault because the violence within prostitution is horrific. It's normal to be beaten and robbed and raped by sex buyers. Those kinds of things are just kind of part of prostitution. And so for some people, it's after experiencing something like that, that might be a moment where they're looking to exit. Good. For others, it might be after a significant overdose. And for others, it just might be they've had enough, right? The hard part is, we as a community don't have the necessary resources and supports to help people in exiting, right? So, not having economic opportunity, is a big driver to push people back into prostitution, right? Not having a safe place to stay, right? Sure. Not having appropriate treatment for substance use disorder. All of these things can kind of drive people backwards.
How do you get in touch with these people? How do you connect with them to tell them we have a safe place for you?
So we take referrals from the correctional facility. A lot of the hospitals in our area know about the work that we're doing. So also a lot of the women that are currently in the life know about the work that we're doing, and so coming in through the drop-in center could be a pathway to entrance into Jana's place, as well as, like I said, hospitals, psychiatric institutions, jails, treatment programs for substance use disorders, so all of these kinds of places. And then also through the court system. So we get referrals from probation and the district attorney's office.
So you do get quite a few.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Quite a few.
It's interesting to me, sad interesting, that this is the first house for a safe house for. I mean, it's not like this is a new issue or problem you've brought, and that's why I find your story so inspiring. You've brought this to a light that's never been brighter in Central Mass, because it's all of Central Mass. It's not just Worcester, and it's Southborough, it's Northborough, it's every community around here, and yet there's never been a way out. And that's wow, it's.
Yeah, so we are not the first safe house. So there's a couple of safe houses.
There are.
But we're the first program to address the trauma from exploitation and substance use coincidingly. So in central Massachusetts, all the way to western Massachusetts, there's nothing. There's no exit programming.
It's kind of scary.
In Boston, there's
Scary.
one. In Boston, there's one. And I think as of recently, this has become kind of a high-profile,
It is an issue. Yes.
But prior to, it's been happening forever.
I was going
and
to say,
it's
this
just
is
people
not a new.
are just starting to
this is
begin to
not
actually
new.
talk about it and allocate funds towards doing something about it.
If there's someone watching this segment, how could they get in touch with you?
Sure. So you can visit our website at liftworcester.org, and there's a contact us tab on the page. And you can also call our telephone number, which is 774-243-6025.
And that's all scrolling underneath us, even as we speak.
Great. So, people can access us that way.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you very much sharing your story. Again,
Very
I have always
interesting.
found it, before meeting you, very inspiring, and even more so learning about not just what you experienced, but what you're doing about it and going forward.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you for all the efforts.
Thank you.
Okay. And congratulations.
Thank you.
yeah, that's great. Hi, Stacy and I are here today with Kimmy Knesek
Hi.
from Indigo Feather
That's
in
correct.
Ashburnham. Okay, great. Thank you for joining us. You're a medium.
Yes.
You're also a Reiki practitioner.
Yep.
And but we want to talk about life as a medium and what does a medium do? And how did you identify that you had this gift and when?
Awesome.
Let's
Well,
start with that.
that's a lot to start with. But
It is.
yes,
It's a lot to
thank-
start with.
Thank you for having me. Well, I'd like just to start with how did this all kind of come up was I've always seen and sensed things growing up. I wasn't 100% certain what to do. I do feel that as mediums, you rely on your natural intuitive abilities, and I say natural because I think I have them, you have them, you have them. But as we get older, sometimes we tend to shut them off. We don't know what to do with them. I know for myself, it took me a lot of years to develop them, and I feel that's what most mediums do, is we've honed this skill, so to speak, that allows me to trust what I hear, see, or feel, trust my intuition. For myself, I also rely on help from non-physical sources, so spirit is when I talk this way because that's kind of where I feel like I get my information from. I tune out my own thoughts so that I can tune into their thoughts is how I explain it.
Okay.
So they can show me images, I can hear songs or movie phrases, or I feel things. You can feel pain, not in bad, but in different areas. So those are ways that I know I am connecting to spirit.
Okay. So you're able to help people, they would come to you, or do you go to people if they're, I mean, there are some mediums I know who will help people who bought a house and they're experiencing strange things going on in the house. Do you do some of that, or is it more people who are coming to you because they have issues that they want to discuss, or what brings people to you? Or
A little bit of all of that.
Okay.
My primary focus, I would say, with the medium work is I get a lot of people who are grieving. So through a friend of a friend, my name gets passed around, and I connect to their past loved one. So for me, I take that as an honor. I know it's a sensitive subject, so I always go into each session with compassion because it's a sensitive time in somebody's life. And what I try to do is I connect to their loved one who's in spirit. I ask them to come through with healing, helpful messages that my client needs to hear. I ask them to come through with their personality so that they know without a shadow of a doubt, I'm talking to their stubborn uncle or this chatty Kathy who doesn't stop talking. The personality traits that you can't not associate with their loved one. And I also ask them to come through with specifics, so specific memories when they were living that they shared, but more importantly, I really always say, come through with something really good. So it's something specific that's happened since they've passed away, so that their loved one here says, oh my gosh, this happened. I know they were here with me when I bought this ornament and hung it on the tree. There's no way I can know that.
Yeah.
But their loved one was with them enough to tell me. So that's what I really like to do, is help people in times of need, when they're feeling lost or they feel like their loved one isn't around and they're just sad. So I always tell them, while I can't physically bring them back, I hope during my session that you feel them again. You feel reconnected. And often it's for them to feel that their loved one's okay. And that they are still around for important milestones in their life. Because oftentimes you say, oh, I wish they were here for this. And if they tell me that and I share it with you that, oh, they were here for this event, that just really makes them feel good, And I think it's important for me to let them know that in times when they're maybe, after a session, that they're feeling sad again, to talk to them, because they do come back. They are always around.
wow, because there's a faith piece of this, you know, and that's something that has interested me about the kind of work you do. All right, there's what happens after, you know, and I have a great faith belief system, but I'm curious as all get out. What is the next? You go through one door, and I know some people have had death experiences, and some very positive, and some maybe not so much. But what, you know, that curiosity about, all right, what's the next step after this?
Yeah.
Which has led me to have very, very little fear about dying.
Yeah.
And but there's that whole, all right, well, how can, you know, Nana, I want to talk to Nana, you know, and I do talk to Nana. My walks probably makes the neighbors, you know, a little scared about me. But, you know, but you know, you wonder, okay, who is showing up and when? I mean, because I'm sure you do too. There's sometimes that I feel like somebody is with me, and I don't always know who.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can feel a presence or something.
Yeah, and that's that natural intuitive ability that I talked about, where you absolutely have that. If you have that synchronicity on your walk where, oh, that bird was there yesterday, or you just have that feeling, that is somebody kind of giving you a little poke, like, hi, Matt, how are you? You know, I'm with you. If you feel it in your gut, there's a reason for that. And if you start talking, or you're talking about your Nana or whoever you're talking about on your walk, and you get this feeling, there's a reason for that. So trust that and go with that. I encourage people to pay attention to synchronicities, you know, whether it's the same song that always comes on. Well, there's a reason for that. Or, you know, oftentimes people think, oh, pennies from heaven, or they always get the same nickel. There's ways that I feel that our past loved ones can come back, because we're all made up of energy. And it's my understanding when you move on, you can still come and show your presence. Maybe not everybody like a medium who can kind of sense or see an outline, but when you get that little inner feeling, know that that's real. That's them connecting to you. So I would encourage people to do that too. You know, you can work on your skills a little bit.
Wow. Because I pray a lot on walks, and I'll talk to different people, or remember them.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Nana I talk to, but aside from Nana, I'll mention, you know, I'll be praying for people, or, you know, about people, and hopefully that there's still some connection with them, and it's, but I don't see them, you know. I don't generally feel, you know, an exact presence. I kind of like that. I would like that. Although I would think that's kind of scary for you sometimes.
I think that's one of the reasons why perhaps I tuned it out a little bit as a young adolescent teen. I wasn't always sure. So the older I got, and I don't particularly have one faith. I always go into it, only those who walk in healing white light, pure energy. Like, I only deal with good. So I never have any fear of anything like that. In terms of being afraid, I'm not, because I just know that I'm protected and I'm being guided by somebody important to do this. I don't always necessarily, so when I say see, sometimes it's just a shadow figure, and you just sense, oh, there's an older man over there. Okay. If he doesn't have anything to say to me, hi, how are you? And he moves on and I move on. Kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I'm sitting in a public place, I might not see perhaps somebody, but I will get like older brother feeling. Okay, I feel like there's an older brother around here, and then perhaps I'll see an image in my head of a basketball or a football or something random that connects. So they show me through signs and symbols that just pop into my head, and again, I've tuned out my thoughts and I'm tuning into their thoughts, and that lets me know that an older brother like figure who likes basketball hears, and you know, and if I start going in on that train of thought, I'll get more, and I can share it.
Now, speaking about signs and things like that, you mentioned earlier there was a reason for indigo feather. So can you tell us a little bit about how, you know, what the inspiration for that was and how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So feathers have had a very strong spiritual meaning for me. So my Native American background, that's one reason I have a connection to hawks, and that's kind of my thing. I feel that there's been times when I was going through stress, or my son has had some allergies. So when he was younger, I would get nervous, and every time I would get nervous and pray or think about that, hawks would kind of be flying. So I always took that as a sign, as everything's going to be okay. As I grew in this spiritual practice and honed my skills, I would start to receive feathers all the time. Now, and you live in the woods, it's okay, but when you open your door and there's nothing, and you open your door again and there's another feather, okay, that's a synchronicity. Or there's a feather, you pick it up and you move it, and the next day there's another feather there. Okay, well, there's a meaning. So those are the synchronicities.
But how do you figure out what the meaning is of the feather?
So you can look it up online, but for me, I just knew that it was like a friendly, hi, we're here.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're
okay.
fine.
Okay.
You're protected. Everyone in your house is fine. So that's kind of how the feather piece came along. Indigo, I like it because to me it correlates with chakras, your crown chakra, and being an indigo child is, so to speak, somebody who is open to this kind of work, psychic abilities, kind of tuned in.
See, you
Interesting.
tend not to deal a lot with any negative forces, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you encounter negative forces and are just able to sort of push them away?
I would say, based upon how when I go into this, I get into my little meditative state, I say what I say, I ask for help from angels, guides, everything like that, and I only work with those who walk in God's white light, healing white light. That's not to say that, so when I'm speaking to a client, generally they're not going to talk to anybody who is typically negative. If I'm in public and I get a really icky feeling, I just walk away because I know that there's something icky. So at that point, when you trust your intuition and your gut, and there's an icky feeling, and I've done this to my family, where it's like, we're leaving now, we're leaving, and they don't question it, and we just go.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting
That's
too.
amazing.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
again, same thing with everybody else. Listen to your intuition. If you walk into a room and you feel a heavy presence and you're not sure why, maybe there was just an argument and that energy is still floating around the room. Or maybe there is something, that is just guiding you to say, I don't know if I like this. And you just
And you
leave.
Wow, interesting. Well, how do people contact you if they're interested in learning more or interested in meeting with you or doing it, having some help online?
So I've got a strong Facebook page, which is where I do a lot of, I do Tarot Tuesdays, so people like to pop in there and get a free 1-card reading, because I like to give back to people when I can, and that's the Indigo Feather. I've got a Facebook, so that's the Facebook page. I have my website, the Indigo Feather Healer.
Well, thank you for coming.
You're
This has
welcome.
been
Thank you for
really
having me. This is
educational.
excellent.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks.